Welcome to Remembering the Forgotten, a space where leaders think out loud without polish or performance. No scripts, no personas, just what becomes audible when the noise drops and the mind is free to speak for itself. These conversations are not about delivering insight, they are about thinking together in real time, testing ideas against stillness, letting two open minds stretch each other. The intention is simple: to create a space where clarity can emerge and where listeners don't just consume perspectives, but feel permission to engage their own thinking more honestly. Today, I'm joined by Jonah Burlingame. Jonah has spent decades designing systems that hold real complexity in digital, physical, and creative environments where structure directly shapes how life is lived. But this conversation isn't about system or design, it's about discernment, knowing when to engage and when to step back, and how clarity emerges when structure stops trying to manage life. Jonah brings a quiet precision shaped by years of building invisible architecture. He understands how stillness allows insight to surface without force. This is a conversation about stewardship rather than control, and the relief that comes when nothing more is being asked. With that, welcome to the show, Jonah.
Thank you, Marcus.
It is my pleasure. So, before we begin, when I speak of coherence, I'm pointing to a state where nothing inside is in conflict. Body, thoughts, emotions, and action aligned, moving as one. No push, no urgency, no fear driving the moment. And when I speak of stillness, I don't mean silence. I mean the part of you untouched by expectation or performance. The place that knows before the mind tries to manage it. That's the ground I'd like us to meet on today. So, with that, Jonah, a very simple question: where can you just be yourself?
I think that if I really had to pinpoint where and if I understand the question precisely here, is when I'm in the zone, when there's a flow and it's you kind of just forget about those expectations, as you mentioned, and the things around you and what you know and what you don't know. Uh, if I had to boil it down, it would be probably cooking, which might
It's
be a
fascinating.
surprise, right? I love to cook. I'm creative by nature. I'm a painter. I play music. I cook. I'm a designer and many things. So where I really find that peace or that flow is a lot of times when I'm cooking, and probably that stands out more than painting, if you will. And I'll get to that in a minute and why there's a distinction between those, even though they are both creative pursuits. But when I'm cooking, um, it's kind of my love language. It's how I show people that I care and I love them. So I love cooking for people. And I'm also very curious about foods, and I cook a wide range of things. And I come from a long line of family members who cook. My father, my grandfather, grandmother, mother, everyone. So to me,
Incredible.
it was just something that I grew up with, and that curiosity has carried from my youth all the way through today. And I'm always looking to understand certain cultural techniques in some of the cultural recipes and so forth, and just
Mhm.
exploring those. And when I'm in the kitchen, and it could be just by myself cooking for my
Hmm.
wife and or my family and friends, but also with other people. I have a lot of other friends that I love to cook with as well, and it just flows. I don't really think about expectations. I don't think about what I can and cannot do. To me, it is here are the things we have, and here's what I'm seeking to do. And it's not even following a recipe per se. It's really
Hmm.
understanding what is this recipe trying to do. And,
Hmm.
it could be Burmese food, it could be Italian, it could be French, it could be
Hmm.
any of these things. But once you grasp what it's trying to do, then taking it and making it your own, there's a creativity there. There's also then at the end of it, there's a presentation, both well, visually, you can smell it, and then ultimately you taste it, and it is just such a fantastic process that rewards me. And then I spoke that there's a slight um, difference between
Painting, huh?
in painting, right? Where you would think I would get the
Hmm.
same thing from painting because it's a pursuit, and I've had a long career as a professional artist.
Hmm.
Uh, I have found that there's always something in my head that asks myself, is this, how does this fit into my overall body of work, right? And that may or may not
That's
be
an interesting one.
good, right? But there's always some sort of
Yes.
outside looking in at the work. And it
Uh,
doesn't mean that I always obey that sometimes, but I can
yeah.
choose to ignore it. But I'm always
Yeah.
there thinking about here's my work. Is it a continuation of what I've done?
Yeah.
Is this something that, um, or will it be something brand new? And what am I chasing? What is it? Does it look too similar to something else I've already seen because I want to be original? But
Hmm.
ultimately, my artwork has to appeal to me first. I'm not doing
Hmm.
artwork I paint in hopes of selling, but I don't paint to sell. I
Hmm.
paint
Hmm.
to reward me and say, I want to explore this. And if I don't like it, I'm not going to put it out there, regardless
Hmm.
if somebody does like it. I've had people come through the studio and say, "Oh, it's great, don't touch it." I'm like, "That's just the underpainting. I've got a long way to go." And they're like, "No, no, 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 don't stop it, or don't do any more." I was like, I need to, I need to keep going on this." And it may be, beyond what they like at that point, but it doesn't matter. It's for me. But during that process, I still have an awareness in my head. There are flow states within my
Hmm.
painting, but it's different than
Hmm.
cooking.
So that's a fascinating aspect. So let me take it into a direction which I'm curious to see what your reaction is. You are not so much, and this is an assumption, you are not so much dependent on anyone else's judgment, feedback. You're actually your own worst critic.
Mm, yes.
Does that fit?
It, yes, I think there's nuance.
It might be
Again,
surprising you know, as a result of my process. But my question is really, does it fit? You're basically your own worst critic, which let's be honest, that's what we artists are. We don't need
I,
much outside feedback for that.
yeah, I think both things can be true. I am my own worst critic in a lot of ways because I do have a standard that I want to hold myself to.
Yeah.
But I will also say that I have long struggled to um, not care about what other people think. And it's unfortunate. And, I, in my youth, of course, I didn't really care that much. But then as you get into, middle school and others, there are expectations and you have an awareness of what people might think about you. And, children are cruel. And so, you know how you react
Hmm.
to those middle school moments and high school moments. And I didn't fit
Hmm.
in high school either. I mean, I was different than a lot of what was going on in my high school. I wasn't an athlete. I wasn't what we called burnouts back then. I wasn't.
Hmm.
I just didn't fit into the normal groups, and so
But
I
that's what
started.
my
Go
wife
ahead.
told me that too many people in the US, especially on your generation, did not have the best high school experience because of that.
Right. Right.
Expectations, perceptions, having to pay up to a certain expectation must have been quite challenging and formative, I assume.
Yeah. And part of it is that I grew up in a very small community, a very small rural
That
town.
makes sense.
And my 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 parents, my father in particular, is very worldly. He always knew what
Hmm.
was going on in the world, and I was born in San Francisco, but as an infant, they went back to Ohio to, raise a child, and I ended up in a very small rural community, and there weren't a lot of things going on at that time in terms of groups. It was pretty divided. You were either a jock or you were a burnout,
Hmm.
or you were in theater, which was a small
Hmm.
theater
Hmm.
department. And so there really wasn't much else going on. Now, computers did kind of enter the scene during my late uh, middle school years, and so I was one of the first to start programming on the old Radio Shack TRS-80,
Hmm. Hmm.
and showed some aptitude for that early on. So then I was a little bit of a geek, but I didn't really fit in with the geek group
Hmm.
either. So I didn't really have a home. I kind of floated amongst them a little bit, but never really felt truly like I had a tribe.
Hmm.
And in college, then I did kind of start to find my tribe. Ironically, I did pursue computer engineering when I first entered college, and that was not my
Okay.
tribe. There were a lot of, this sounds harsh, but there were a lot of, a sea of like maybe 100 people in the class, all men, and some of them with the tape on their glasses, right in the middle of the glasses. It was really
Really?
nerdy, and I was like,
Classic.
no, this is. There was nobody
This is
that I
not
felt
you.
like I wanted to have a beer with. And that sounds harsh, but you do kind of want to hang out with people that kind of share your your affinity for various things. And so I left that as well. I said, well, that's not for me, and pursued design, and went into graphic design, and also took some classes in fine arts. And that's where I started to really find myself and my tribe.
That's fascinating. So, what would you say is the differentiation between you painting and you cooking? Because both is a very artistic process. Um, it's probably quite similar, I assume.
Yeah.
I love cooking. I don't do so much painting, but I assume it's pretty similar. So, is it because one of them is more on the commercial side and the other one is more on the fun side?
I think that's largely it. And you said something there that is quite interesting. I feel that they both satisfy kind of a similar desire to be creative, because when I'm
Mhm.
painting a lot, I have less of a desire to cook, and when I'm cooking a
Mhm.
lot, I have
Mhm.
less of a desire to paint. So,
Mhm.
uh,
Makes sense.
one takes care of the desire for creative output. Um, but yes, I think if I were just painting solely for myself, I would probably have more freedom. And, it
Mhm.
contradicts what I said earlier, because I am painting for myself, but I'm painting for myself with a professional lens of, here
Mhm.
is the larger story and the larger output for me. And, that is, unfortunately, that is limiting. And I do have some ideas of things that I want to go and like break that and start something completely new. And I have something in my mind that I want to do, but it's going to require a lot of somewhat retooling and rethinking,
That's
and not as
amazing.
easy
I love
as
that.
what I've done. Cooking, you can pick up a different type of cuisine
Yeah.
relatively easy. You buy a few ingredients and you kind of understand what
Yeah.
it's doing, and you can explore that. With art, if I want to go from painting in acrylics to suddenly doing things that have sound manipulation and uh, microphones and speakers in them, and but still wall art, that requires a new level of understanding of new
Yeah.
materials, an investment in those things, and so forth. So
Hmm.
the barrier is a little bit higher to
Hmm.
make a significant change to that.
So that would almost go into installations then, not just like flat paintings, but literally like installations.
Yes, I'm still viewing them as like sound paintings, so they would still be a 2D, well, it's a 3D wall art, I guess, 2D, 3D. I don't know how you look at that, but something that you could interact with versus just visually looking at, right? And so
Mhm.
I've got some really high level concepts that I've yet to materialize, and I kind of need to kind of spend some time and just dive in somewhere, but it's it's going to definitely take me down a rabbit hole that I have to be prepared to go into.
There would be a lot of cooking involved to counterpart that.
Yes,
That's fascinating. So when you think back, interesting enough, you said when you were a child was much more carefree than I assume today is. Um, was there a moment in time in your life where you suddenly realized something is different? It's almost like when everything went quiet and you suddenly knew, hmm, that's my truth.
I I don't I don't think so. I think that it I think it really I think I struggled for a long time. I think it almost got worse over time. And if I looked at it, I'm a very visual thinker,
Mhm.
communicator. But if I look at it, it's really I and where I am now and looking forward and seeing kind of a trajectory. Youth, it kind of starts off very tranquil and free, and then as you get older and the expectations are there, you feel less
Mhm.
free and more
Mhm.
expectations and more, and you're in that productivity and earning and uh, cycle and all of that. And then as I'm getting older, I'm finding that that chatter and that noise and those expectations are starting to, I'm willing to let go of them now. So, and I've been doing some
It's
reading on this
beautiful.
too. And that is something that is common as you get into your
Mhm.
50s and beyond. You start to care less about those things and start
Mhm.
to just be yourself, and it becomes more of a calming uh, um, way of being. And that's kind of where I'm seeing it heading, and I'm starting to feel much better about uh, that peace of mind
Mhm.
rather than having to
I
just,
love that.
yeah.
This actually just raised the question in me, especially people who have been in careers, let's say high level, high stress, high demand careers. And a lot is associated with these expectations from others. Would you say that, and this is a little bit of a leading, guiding question, would you say that if one would realize that less adhering to expectations and actually more following your inner voice might as make us even more successful than we actually are? That there is almost a paradigm out there which is faulty. Like the more you adhere to expectations, the better you are, the better you are accepted, but that it's exactly that acceptance and that fear of not being accepted and respected actually stifles the number one quality, which could be creativity and curiosity.
Yeah, I think there's nuance to that. I think that, unbridled, or lack of care at all, I think is dangerous.
It's
And
either or, right?
right, I don't think that the truth lives on the spectrums there. I think that there's a sweet spot in there that you're aware of the expectations, but you also have an inner confidence of things that you know how to deliver on, either better than the expectations or actually shifting the expectations too. And I think that's where I've seen a lot of leaders, really good leaders, really excel. And what really is interesting to me is, rather than accepting, here are the expectations as given to you, and actually maybe challenging those expectations to make sure they're the right ones. And
Hmm.
if you can say, why is this the expectation? And they give you an
Hmm.
answer, you say, well, if we look at the business or the need or whatever it may be, at a more macro level, it's actually this over here, right? And so let's
Uh-huh.
shift that. And now I feel more aligned with that, and that's something that I can deliver on that doesn't require me to be constantly aware of the expectation. It's more in line with what I think should be done anyway, because I want to solve the problem. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that there is
It
nuance.
does.
Do you know what I mean?
It
And
does. And
give that too,
yeah,
that
no, if you mentioned the key, and that's the question why. I believe today a lot of people do not dare to question something. And I believe that could be a key,
yeah,
especially in business, just to ask why. And remember when we were kids, the
yeah,
one
yeah,
thing that annoyed my parents the most was my wife.
yeah, yeah.
Because they were nonstop.
It's
But
true.
I believe today, if we actually started asking why more often, it would actually ease everything. Because I still believe that most expectations I was having in life came from my own rule set and not so much from other people. And asking why would actually have opened a dialogue between people.
Yes, and you bring up a good point about children asking why all the time, and that becomes both annoying, and it also sounds a bit disrespectful. And I think that can continue on even in a
Hmm.
professional setting, that if you challenge by asking why, and then that may be counterproductive. There's a grace, an elegance to how you ask why,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Absolutely.
Right. And it can be a dialogue, and that is more productive when you're actually
Hmm.
working in concert with somebody, rather than saying, why do you want to do that? And
Hmm.
challenging them. It is like, oh, that's interesting. I'd love to understand a little bit more about, why you're trying to do X, Y,
Hmm.
Z, and start to peel it apart a little bit, and then getting maybe over here or somewhere new, uh, together, right? And then you both have
Hmm. Hmm.
buy-in because you've actually taken it to a new level. So
Hmm.
that's where I really think that you see them, when somebody has been in a career for, and there's a maturity and a wisdom, in there, and they know what to do with not only how to ask the why, but what to do with the why and shape that
Hmm.
why
Hmm.
together.
Hmm. Hmm.
Anytime you're trying to do it in business or life or whatever, if you can generate
Hmm.
that advocacy or that shared sense of being or need with somebody else, you're stronger together, right? Rather than going in
Hmm.
and as a bull in a china shop and saying, I know how to do this, step
Hmm.
out of my way, or I'm going to challenge you to do, and try and get there. If you can do it together and get other people on board and have the deeper conversations, and generate that advocacy, you're going to be stronger, and you're going to, go further and
Hmm.
farther, together.
So imagine if leadership would actually encourage their employees to ask why, how the environment and the culture would change immediately.
Yeah, I'll that one could be, I could see that one backfiring a little bit if
How would
you
that how would it happen? Because let me add something to that. I have people who say to me, what if everyone does it? And I said, honestly, do you really believe everyone does it? I believe the right whys would be asked, which might be 5 or 10% out of the 100, but those could be game changing. Because I share with you something. Had I not asked why, guess what happened? No buy-in from Marcus.
Right.
Because unless I understood, no buy-in. I was that generation. And if someone just told me because, guess what my next question was? Why?
Yeah.
Why? And it actually helped my superiors when I was really young to think about their game. So it's almost like testing a paradigm again for everyone who listens or watches the show to actually think, what if I would actually encourage my employees to ask more why? Maybe the buy-in would be greater.
I absolutely agree. I think that no, I've been on both sides of that. I've been one of the people as a
Mhm,
consultant asking why a particular leader is trying to achieve certain objectives and how they're going to measure that. I mean, that's a very standard thing, and so you do that with elegance and professionalism. I've also led teams to where younger younger people on the team would ask why. And it's not that I didn't it's not that I didn't want to be challenged, but it was also how it was being asked. It felt
yes.
like I don't trust you as a leader. I want to ask you why. And sometimes it is a matter of, well, all right, let's walk through this together, and I'm happy to do that, and that does create that buy-in from the team. So I also think that there is a good leader will anticipate that why and who's on the team
Mhm,
and actually kind of build that into the overall initial
mhm, mhm,
conversation, right? Um,
mhm, mhm,
so you shouldn't be afraid of the why, but I think you can also anticipate the why
mhm,
strategically to be able to say, all right, let's navigate this and give them kind of what they need for the buy-in so that they'll actually really understand what they do. It's when people understand the objective really well and you are allowing their expertise and their talents to show up to achieve that
mhm.
objective, that gives them the autonomy to figure it out in their own special
Exactly.
way, but then achieve the goals and many times surprise you. I led a team. This is several years ago now, but led a team that consistently uh, surprised me when I gave them the autonomy to use their expertise, but then,
Mhm,
but gave them the context and the framework for by which to say, here's what we're trying
mhm,
to achieve. Here's how we'll measure success. Here is a potential framework for how to how to approach it.
mhm,
Go. And I'm here if you need me, right?
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
so supportive, but also not micromanaging and so forth.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. So this absolutely showcases how challenging it is to be a manager or a leader.
Mhm.
It's an art form. Let's be honest. It is an art form.
Yeah.
And what is so fascinating is you just mentioned something, Jonah, that responsibility is a word that is dreaded, feared, and not so much liked because it's usually something you need to shoulder. And I gave it some thought recently about the word responsibility. And I realized what you just shared before is you give them authority. Authority, I believe, is the word to really think, to involve themselves into the solution finding process or into the finding of the way in that process. Whereas so many leaders and managers do not give their employees authority. They give them the responsibility to shoulder, but they don't welcome the input, which actually makes it possible um, to give the buy-in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I believe this is something, leaders today really have to give it some thought, because the new generation is not called for naught the generation Y. And it doesn't have to do anything with the alphabet, by the way. It's literally the word Y.
Hmm.
So the new generation will question a lot. Maybe 75% is something they should be quiet. But the 25% are the questions that probably will further accompany exponentially if done well. So we are in interesting times.
I
So which
couldn't
leads
agree
me
more.
to mhm,
Said I couldn't agree more, and it's y- you know, when growing up, I tended to do what was asked of me and
mhm,
do more than was expected so that I could not
mhm,
only I had to trust what they were asking me to do, even if it was a menial
mhm,
job, like, getting dry cleaning or pouring coffee or whatever it may be. Um, I knew that that wasn't where I was always going to be because I would prove myself up there. But I didn't ask why, and I didn't think it was beneath me. I knew that I had to go
mhm,
in and do these things. And that is not that's not what I've seen in the subsequent generations, where like, what, that's not my title. Get coffee,
right,
and
right.
it's fair, and that is a menial task, and I think that's shifted a lot, and I'm not arguing that it shouldn't have shifted, but there's also something about trusting in the hierarchy a little bit to say, I trust that you've got me on an experience for a reason. Now, we've seen plenty of people have abused that, so why would they trust in
Mhm,
that system? So
mhm,
I completely understand how we got here and
mhm,
all that. But there's this pendulum that is swung a little bit from not asking
mhm,
why to maybe
mhm,
asking why for every single thing, and it
mhm,
becomes
mhm,
very challenging to manage. And I've spoken with a lot
mhm,
of other leaders that say these last two generations entering the workforce have been very challenging to manage.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm,
yeah, I haven't managed a lot of teams. I really only went in-house to manage teams for a handful of years, and I had fortunately exceptional people that I was working with, but I
mhm,
certainly understand the context that
mhm,
I've heard other leaders talk about.
mhm. Yeah, because it's literally their daily bread now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether you might heard that on another episode where I said that I had a client which was one of the biggest police corps in Switzerland, and I stood in front of them lecturing about feedback. And I started my workshop by saying the question is not if, the question is when you guys have to change. Like imagine that police corps known to command, to control,
Right.
to correct, right? And I stand there and I say, it's not your employees who will change because they can't. It's you who will have to change your approach.
Yeah.
And he came to me in break time and he said, Sir, I was shocked when I realized how you disregarded the actual objective. But I was so grateful. I shut up and I listened because something caught my interest. And then he became almost melancholic, Jonah, and he said, You know what, sir? Many years ago, I've been pondering exactly this question. Is it actually us as leaders who have to rethink our game? And now you came and gave me the confirmation. So, for everyone who listens, literally think about whether it's time to actually rethink the leadership game we've been living for 20, 30 years. Because I do think it's not working much longer. We can fire people, we can hire people. That's usually when I say to my clients, this won't change your results because the problem is not so much the workforce. Here's the mirror. And that's usually when they say, oops.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's a conversation worth having because I
Absolutely.
literally believe this new generation cannot adapt anymore to the level we could. Just think about the generation of our parents, Jonah. They had absolutely not even in their minds to ask why, or to even ask anything back, or to say anything back. Our generation had it already in our heads, but we were so much taught not to speak back, not to question stuff. But the more and more the generations get younger, I believe there is something changing in their DNA, which makes them so freedom loving, which is way too much. But now, something surprisingly, they have found out, Jonah, that the Generation Y is one of the most insecure generations ever in existence. And those are the ones who do not dare to ask if they don't know. So it is the leader who has to step into a mentoring function if they really want to succeed. And the mentoring function is actually not here for a lifetime. The mentoring function is here to build the confidence and build the courage and build trust.
Yes.
So these are things I absolutely love. So which brings me to another question. In regards to trust, when was a moment when you realized I am living someone else's life or someone else's script? And what changed after that realization?
I don't know that I have ever felt like I was living somebody else's life.
I'm not surprised, by the way.
Uh, I have found myself perhaps in roles. I don't even know if that's necessarily true, but finding that, all right, well, here is the well-trodden path. Here is the next step that you will take. But I've never really been good at climbing the ladder in the traditional way. And I'll be vulnerable here. I So I did go to college, but I paid my own way through college, and
Mhm.
I actually never completed it. So I never got my degree.
Mm.
As I was working in college, I was bartending by day, going to school at night, and
Uh-huh.
at some point I was bartending and I met some people that owned a small business, and it was in needed graphic design, and they were going to bring computers into the mix. Actually,
Uh-huh.
that wasn't their goal. They were doing some graphic design uh, business, and that's what I was going to school for. And so
Uh-huh.
I said, let me work for you, found my way
Uh-huh.
working for them. And then that's when I saw the opportunity to bring computers into their business and change it, and essentially digital transformation for that small business. And so I led that charge. And at that point, I was like, well, this is what I wanted to do. It's the
Mhm.
intersection of
Mhm.
design and technology. It's
Mhm.
perfect for me. And
Mhm.
I stopped going to college. And at some
Interesting.
point, I just never went back. And
Mhm.
the other aspect of it is that I switched colleges, going from Akron University to Kent State because Kent State had a better design program, and I lost a fair number of credits whenever I did that transfer. They just didn't
Oh,
transfer over, so I lost time. And
yeah,
so
makes
it
sense.
became, why am I doing this? It's a lot of money, it's a lot of effort, and
Yeah,
I'm working in what I'm doing. Well, things
yeah.
kept parlaying into better and better opportunities. And I'm always curious and more interested in being on the frontier of things than actually
Okay.
being a cog in the machine. And so once I get to the point where, yeah, everything's running great, um, you should put somebody else in that role. That is not for me. I
Makes
want to
sense.
be on what is the next to either optimize the system, digital transformation, understanding what can be next and fixing problems or innovating. To me, that was always the more interesting thing. So there was never a ladder for me to climb in that regard. I had to move from one place to another, but
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
always very comfortable being low man on the totem pole, to
Mhm.
kind of say, I'm the new person in the room, but let's fix this. And then
Mhm.
I get
Mhm.
the accolades, and then I'm on to the next thing, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
Makes
so
sense.
I've never really been in a place where I felt I was living somebody else's life. I will say though that it took me a long time to realize that's the person I was or am.
Uh-huh.
And I had to do that for many years to look back and say, oh, this is why I don't look good on paper. This is why I can't use a resume to open doors.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
for me, it's about a network of people that have worked with me and understand what
Yeah.
I can do and and then moving into consulting made sense because then I can be that outside in resources where I can come in and say,
No, it
well,
totally
that's
makes
project based
sense.
and then move on. Yeah.
Totally makes sense what you're saying. So thank you for your vulnerability about that.
Yeah.
Have you seen the ads where they actually tackle exactly the subject, where the HR person says, "Sir, I haven't really found your degree," and that person said, "Yeah, it's because I don't have one." And then that person goes into their skills, and it actually comes down to an initiative that companies should hire based on skills and not on degrees. And they say that they are 60% more successful in finding the right person for the position if they hire for skills and not for degrees.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. Because, I have hired a lot of people, and I can tell you, degrees, especially the higher up they went, that was definitely no guarantee for quality.
Right.
Definitely not. So that is an interesting thing. Yeah, but I'm not surprised really about your answer in terms of not having lived somebody else's life because you were fortunate enough moving to Ohio, you said, right?
Yeah, I was born in San Francisco, raised in Ohio, and then moved back to San Francisco in 2000. So, yeah.
And probably the Ohio experience helped you to build that foundation, which you're building everything on in terms of your personality now, which is interesting. So if you never really lived somebody else's script, and from our previous conversation, I remember that you are someone who is in stillness almost on demand. I don't think it's just cooking. I don't think it's just painting. You have that somehow in you that you can go into that stillness. What is it that can pull you out of yourself? And how do you come back?
How do I pull myself out of myself? You mean in terms of getting into that stillness and then,
No,
or
it's
how do
basically what can happen that you lose that sense of stillness.
I, oh,
So literally, you're being pulled out of it. What would that be?
I think it's when I don't have direct control of my outcome. And yeah, I think this is a good example. One of the other places that I have found stillness at times, and I just absolutely love, and I think you'll enjoy this too because you mentioned it, was when I have facilitated a lot of workshops for
Mhm.
corporations and such. And you can be, as small as, 10 people all the way up through about 50 people in a multi-day
Uh-huh.
workshop. Takes a lot of upfront planning and understanding who is in the room. So I'll do all the
Uh-huh.
homework of who are the people, not only looking at their skills and their titles, but also understanding what are their characteristics and asking other people who they are. They might be naysayers, they might be advocates for a particular aspect of something or whatever. They're new to the company or they're old to the company, whatever it may be. I do a lot of homework of who is in the room and understanding what those dynamics are or could be. I look at all of the agenda and all the activities that ladder up to each other so that we can achieve a certain outcome. All of these things that I can do pre-planning to then essentially get on stage. I always call it getting on stage because you're the center of the room and you are
Mhm.
orchestrating the entire thing. And there's a
Mhm.
flow whenever you have done all of that work and you
Mhm.
go into it and then it is they don't make sense to people. So you have to figure all
Hmm.
of that. And when those go really well, it's because I'm in a zone and I've controlled all of those aspects and anticipated all of the details. But I have had two large workshops that did not go well, and it was because I didn't control all of them and I had to facilitate it.
It's
And so there were some
interesting.
things that were missed. There were some things that I couldn't have anticipated because I didn't have the opportunity to, or the people changed at the last minute or whatever it was.
Yeah, yeah.
And those took me out of that moment because then you get shaken. And so you're on
That's so fascinating.
day two of a 5 day workshop, and suddenly you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, this is not going well. How am I going to get to there, right? And you stay up all night trying to figure it out, and then you start thinking about the expectations and what does this mean, blah 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 blah. And so yeah, that can really
That's
take you down.
incredible. Yeah. So basically, control gives you the foundation for stillness, and when you lose control, that's when stillness goes away quite a bit, huh?
Yeah, and maybe control isn't quite the word because I love serendipity. I love
Because it
the
actually
opportunity for
surprises me,
chance,
to be honest.
right? So it's not
I don't think it is
it's
control.
preparation. It's preparation, maybe is
Interesting. Hmm.
and I have my own frameworks for how to approach things, and I've
Hmm.
developed these things knowing that if I take care of these things, I can allow for fluidity amongst all of us or chance or any of that, but I know how to bring it back to the pillars of the
Yeah,
framework or whatever it may be. But
yeah,
if you
yeah.
take that away from me and I don't have that structure or one of those pillars is compromised, then suddenly it can be shaky and
That's
it's my name
interesting.
on it, right? And I didn't build the
Yeah,
foundation. So
yeah,
it's perhaps you're right. It's less about control and more about the preparation and making sure that everything is there for success. And I'm
yeah,
not relying on somebody else's foundation or lack
yeah.
of.
You and I would be an amazing co-teaching team, by the way, because I'm the absolute opposite. Absolute opposite. I have minimum input, and then I literally do and take almost everything out of the moment. So that's why that control thing, kind of didn't make sense, but I think it's preparation.
Yeah, yeah.
That's literally what it comes down to. Which brings me to already my last question, Jonah. If someone feels lost in the noise right now, what would you want them to remember?
They feel lost in the noise of the moment. What would they remember?
Pretty much the opposite of stillness. They're drowning.
Yeah, this is a life skill that I think you can acquire. I mean, you don't automatically acquire it with age, but it's something that is important to be aware of and try to develop, and that is that signal to noise ratio and really understanding what is
Mhm,
important versus what is not. And it can be it is very practical as looking at the daily headlines and just seeing, okay, what is important here that I need to understand? And it could just be directionally. I don't need all the details of
mhm,
whatever it may be under those headlines. I need to understand what is it that this is signaling, and then just kind of keep this over here. And then at some point, synthesizing those signals to say, oh, okay, well, there are a couple of these that are stacking up that are creating this direction, right? And so I think that that's part of it is just understanding how to filter through the noise to find the signals.
mhm,
And that is
mhm,
something that, I've had to learn to do for businesses. Uh, I've developed it in my consulting practice. I'd say this is interesting. I don't know if I've developed it or I have it, and that's why I do what I do. But in essence, I've mostly worked on the agency side or the consultancy side, which allows me to go
mhm,
into any business and become a quick study of their business to understand what they do, why they do it, and their
mhm.
problems and objectives and all of these things. And that uh, uh, it's there's a benefit to being able to look at what's important, and the details are also important, but not to perhaps what I'm trying to achieve. And so how do you quickly do that to say, here's really the opportunity or the challenge or whatever that may be, even though there's a ton of other data and things like this that the hiring manager will say, oh, you should speak to all of these people. And I say, yeah,
Hmm.
but I don't need all this level of detail here, and I can easily
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
compartmentalize it, either push it off or say I don't really need that at that time. And I think we can do that in life too. And I think it's a skill that is
Hmm.
increasingly necessary
I agree.
for humanity, largely
Hmm.
because everything can be known at all times, right? We have information at our fingertips that is, with the internet, it used to be you could pull that information at any time and you had access to
Hmm.
it. So it required you to pull that information to you. Now
Hmm.
it's being thrust upon us in all directions,
Hmm.
and you can't help but feel like inundated with news and information, um, good or bad. And I'd love to see more good. Um, I will say that I think there's a possibility, there's a potential. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be true, but when you work with the AI systems that are essentially synthesizing information, it's taking information from across a broader network or whatever it was trained on, and then synthesizing that to you and say, well, generally most people believe this, but there are a few that believe this, right?
Hmm.
That synthesizes the information into a way that humans at a capacity, yeah, the capacity of which humans can start to work with rather than being overwhelmed with. I've gone to Google and I have looked at 100 articles here and 100 articles here and
Hmm.
trying to synthesize that myself, which can be overwhelming, especially when you get into
Hmm.
details. Now, there's a lot of nuance to that in terms of AI. Is it trained properly? Is it biased? All these things. But I do think as a model, I think there is hope in that AI is going to create a lot more content and information,
Hmm.
but it also can be, I think, a remedy to itself in being able to help synthesize those things. Um, so I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily better than the way things were, but I think that's just kind of how it's going. So that's where I find um, s- a lot of relief is being able to trying to synthesize a lot of things very quickly into what it really means, and so I can make better decisions without being overwhelmed.
It makes sense. If I summarize what you just said, basically, when we start focusing on there is a signal which is now overthrown or overshadowed by noise. And if we actually focus on listening and hearing the signal again, that's when we have the right focus. Does that somehow summarize it? To
Yeah, it's being
remember,
able
it's
to,
just not the noise. There is a signal which is not heard right now.
right.
And
And
focusing on the signal brings us into the right direction.
right, the noise is vast, and you will have to find the
Mhm.
signals within that. And repeating
Okay.
noise, patterns within the noise create the signals, right? You hear
That's an
something
interesting.
several times, that becomes a signal to something. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to act on it or it's correct. Largely, it's sometimes just people feel a certain way. Well, that's not necessarily truth. That's not a fact. It is just
Uh-huh.
this is what the reporting has found, and it's a signal. Okay, well, if a large group of people are feeling a certain way, what implications are there with that signal and starting to
Mhm.
play that out? And much of the work that I was doing, that I do for companies is, uh, futures innovation. So really looking at and building that muscle for strategic agility, thinking about what
Mhm.
is possible and what is plausible in terms of the
Mhm.
future.
Mhm.
And in doing that, you have to look across the spectrum of, political, cultural, technological, economic forces, and look and say, okay, what is happening right now in each one of those areas? And what are the signals that I can start to extract implications to the future? And so it's something that you can build that ability to do, that you can not only do it professionally, but you do it personally as well. So a lot of
Mhm.
how I try to take in information throughout my day is really through that lens. Now, I'm not always successful. There are times I'm practically in the fetal position with any of the news or whatever you might hear on a given day. But you have to step back from it and say, all right, what's the big picture? Yes, that was horrible, but what is the signal to all of this? What are the
And I
implications?
think that's what it comes down to. You use two words quite repeatedly: synthesize and signal. And I believe if we take noise, sit down, and synthesize that, we are actually landing at the signal.
Yes.
So, with that, Shona, thank you so much for having been my guest. It's been a huge pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Always a pleasure to speak with you, Marcus, and thank you for
Likewise,
inviting me to speak with you in your living room.
and to be continued.
I'd love that.
This was Remembering the Forgotten, a conversation held in clarity, not performance. If something in this exchange shifted how you see, let it stay with you. A few quiet pointers are waiting below.